Hey everyone, thank you for listening to the Gray Stage Podcast. Before we get started here, I just want to remind you that if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to the Gray Stage Podcast. My name is Greg Fernandez Jr. I'm one of many researchers looking into this case. I began looking into this case trying to prove David Crowley guilty. 5 years later, I still don't have any proof. We have a lot of speculation, but we have a lot of speculation about many different theories, including what the investigators told us. We're going to go over my book thoroughly, looking at all of the different points made in that book. And where we go from there, we'll see. This is the monthly podcast, and I want to thank everybody for joining us here. God bless you all. Let's get to it. First responders. At 1:04 p.m. on January 17, 2015, Apple Valley Police Sergeant Greg Dahlstrom arrived at the crime scene. There he saw Colin Prochnow standing in Lorraine Tuppy's driveway. Mr. Prochnow approached the officer stating there were bodies in the living room of the Crowley home. Sergeant Dahlstrom then approached the front window and looked inside the residence. I noticed several obviously dead bodies lying on the floor near the front picture window, Sergeant Dahlstrom wrote in his supplemental report. I noticed a black handgun on the floor as well. Lastly, I noticed a medium-sized dog barking and running among the bodies. I advised dispatch of my findings, Sergeant Dahlstrom continued, and requested the channel be restricted to emergency traffic. The sergeant then informed Captain John Bermel of the situation. Officer Tara Becker was the second responder to arrive at the crime scene. Sergeant Dahlstrom advised me that there were in fact 3 deceased parties that could be seen from the large picture window at the front of the residence. Officer Becker did not report seeing the bodies in any of her supplemental reports we received. Officer John Broughton arrived third. With all 3 officers standing on the west side of the house, they could smell the odor of decaying bodies. Officer Broughton was the first officer to check the back of the house. I was instructed to check the rear of the residence for any signs of forced entry, Broughton documented. The backyard is fenced in with a chain link fence and the gates were closed but not locked. Officer Broughton entered the backyard and saw fresh animal tracks in the snow. Signs of forced entry were not found on any backyard windows, but there was an open door. The rear sliding patio door was found open slightly 1/4 of an inch, wrote Broughton. I opened the door and found that it was not locked or secured with a bar lock. Palaio continued to bark as Broughton opened the rear slider. When I opened the patio door, there was an overpowering odor of decaying flesh. 1 light was on in the dining room, Broughton continued. The Christmas tree lights and other strings of Christmas lights were still on. After walking around the back of the house, Officer Broughton looked through the front window and saw 3 bodies on the living room floor. They were all badly decomposed, Broughton wrote in his report. 1 adult body was lying on its back with a black semi-auto pistol nearby. The second adult body appeared to be laying on its stomach and or side. Between 2 adult bodies was the body of a small child. Officer Adam Keeler arrived fourth and helped secure the scene until Palaio was removed from the house. Once Community Service Officer Brian Booth arrived, Officer Keeler opened the rear sliding door and the officers attempted to lure Palaio outside with dog treats. Officer Keeler reported it took 5 minutes for Palaio to come outside. The dog was scared upon arrival, wrote CSO Brian Booth, but appeared to be friendly. I was able to catch the dog with a choke pull and get it into the bed of my truck where it stayed until roughly 1900 hours. CSO Booth then took Palaio to Palomino Pet Hospital and advised the kennel to only feed and water the dog but not to do anything else with it since it was part of an investigation. Next, Sergeant Dahlstrom and Keeler entered the house through the rear slider. Prior to entering the residence, wrote Sergeant Keeler, I announced officers' presence. There was no response. The 2 officers cleared the garage first, then the main level, ending with the basement. I noted the writing on the living room wall, wrote Keeler. which appeared to say Allahu Akbar. It appeared to be written in blood with fingerprints. Sergeant Dahlstrom also noticed blood writing on the living room wall. I noticed letters on the wall that appeared to be written in blood. Dahlstrom also reported seeing several bloody footprints on the floor in the area between the kitchen and living room. Below the wall on the living room floor lay 3 heavily decomposed bodies, 2 adults and 1 child. At this time, Broughton reported, the bodies are presumed to be that of the homeowners David Timothy Crowley, born 7/7/85, and Kamel Rasul Crowley, born 11/20/86, and their daughter Rania Crowley. With all 3 levels cleared, officers left the house and waited for detectives to arrive. The Crowleys' mailbox was full. After Officer Becker photographed the mailbox, she opened it and removed 2 pieces of mail, one belonging to David and the other to Kamel. The postmaster was arriving at this time, wrote Becker, and handed me today's mail, which was placed inside the mailbox. An interesting note found in the BCA notes stated mail in mailbox, December 29th, /front packages 11015. Alright, so that was reading from pages 13 to pages 15 of The Gray Stage by myself, Greg Fernandez, looking at the first responders. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 first responders is what we're looking at here. All before the detectives arrive and all before the BCA shows up. And obviously, way before the medical examiner shows up as well. What you'll see here is some of the most important information about what happened to the Crowleys. And with that, we're going to take you right into our call with Dan Hennon, Sophia, Stephanie, and of course, our good friend Anne.
We'll be covering the chapter called First Responders in tonight's show. This is basically pages 13, 14, and 15 of the book, A Gray Stage.
I think what is really important here is the first responders should all have the same story. They should all look at the same bodies and report them the exact same way. So that's what I was looking for here. People can judge that for themselves, whether all of these officers who entered that house or who showed up to the scene and looked through the front window and saw these bodies, did they all see the exact same thing?
Sergeant Greg Dahlstrom was there 1:04 p.m. He arrived, and he was the very first person. He looked in, approached the front window, and looked inside. So he was the very first responder on site. And he goes on to say that, quote, I noticed several obviously dead bodies lying on the floor near the front picture window. That's what he wrote in his supplemental report. And, quote, I noticed a black handgun on the floor as well. Lastly, I noticed a medium-sized dog barking and running among the bodies.
In my opinion, I think Paleo was probably happy to see somebody alive and looking in the window. Maybe that a protective instinct also kicked up in him.
I was thinking it was more of a, like, this is my house, what are you doing looking in the window type of thing from Paleo. That's at least the feeling I got from reading all the reports when they talk about how frantic he is. But I've kind of changed my view on that a little bit. I'm not so 100% on that because of the smudge marks on the window. The window was surprisingly clean for a frantic dog being near it.
I still don't think he attacked that window the way that certain people have said it.
Yeah, these officers don't say anything like that.
Correct.
Very different. And Paleo knew them. Paleo had at least seen Colin Prochnow and Judy Prochnow at some point, I'm guessing. So Sergeant Dahlstrom then basically lets Captain John Burmel know about the situation. And then Officer Tara Becker is the second to show up at this crime scene. And what was very curious to me is that it doesn't sound like, if you read Officer Tara Becker's documents, it doesn't sound like she sees these bodies, period. Maybe I'm reading more into it than I should, but...
Should she have looked?
She had to have looked, didn't she?
Confirm what she was told? Like, shouldn't she have had to look? And
I would think so. I don't know why she wouldn't. But if she did, shouldn't it be here? Shouldn't it be in these documents?
Yeah, in her report, I saw, like the other guys put in.
Right.
Whereas with hers, it's so-and-so advised me.
And she does see them later because she's taking photos. She's either taking photos or taking video, but she's in there later on, so you would think that at that point there should be some documentation from her.
And she is, I don't believe she's a tall woman. I think she's very short in stature, so she wouldn't have been able to see through that window anyway from the outside. Even being on her tiptoes, she wouldn't have been able to see in. So that would make sense. I agree that she wouldn't have seen by first responding, officer until she actually went around through the back and went into the residence. I think I agree with Stephanie. I think the dog was just frantic, running around. May have been excited to see living human beings as well, or just frantic, excited, or all of the above. I think the dog was just running around, didn't know what to think. I don't know if the first couple of squad cars came on there with their lights and sirens on and everything, and may have been very startling. Or maybe they just showed up with no lights, no sirens. We don't know.
The dogs above us, every time that sirens go by our apartments, they freak out. And I don't know how Paleo was, but if they came in with sirens on, it's very possible that could have set him off too. Now, I know that like ambulances or police that go by our apartments, when they turn into a residential area, they leave their lights on, but their sirens are turned off. But we're next to a really busy boulevard, so when they're on that, they leave them on. But as soon as they turn down the residential road, they turn the sirens off, but the lights are still on. So I don't know what the procedure is in Minnesota or Apple Valley.
I mean, you would think, okay, if it's just for a welfare check, maybe not, which is what Colin, tells him. That's what he wants after seeing the bodies. Just, can somebody come and do a welfare check? But listening to what Judy said, you can, it's like there's a murder or a suicide and the dog is eating bodies and there's presence out there. At this point, they don't know that there isn't a killer in that house based on her call. It's a big difference than just coming over and doing a welfare check. But the officers, they don't act like there's some impending danger or anything like that. It's more about seeing those dead bodies, and obviously they're going to clear this house at some point, but they have to get that dog out first. So at this point, do we already think that they're not worried about finding anybody in the house who might have killed these people, and they're not worried that there's presence out on the front doorsteps? That could be bombs or something. They really don't know anything at this point.
Why would they think they were bombs?
Well, because...
Well, they don't know. That's the thing. They don't know what they're walking into. They have no idea if they're about to walk into a house that's going to be, blown up any second. They don't know. But given Judy's phone call, she was who they first talked to. And from her phone call, it doesn't sound like there's kind of any imminent danger. And then, you get to Colin's part, and it's more or less like, okay, well, there's dead people in there, but there's really no threat anywhere else.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember reading anything outside of the gossip from the friends that there was any suspicion of bombs. And they don't mention it in the reports, do they?
No.
Okay. I think it was only Nathan Hendricks and Sean White that mentioned that.
Correct. Now, Greg, if I could just jump in here. When the first officer came, Dahlstrom, he did see the neighbor, Colin Prochnow, standing in the driveway of the other neighbor, chatting, and then he came up and told him that the bodies are in the front in the picture window. So I think the imminent danger may have been relieved at that point when they saw the two neighbors just chatting calmly in the driveway, and saying, yeah, they're inside, the bodies are outside. So maybe that led them to assume that there was no imminent danger, perhaps. I don't know.
It's just weird. Like, I guess everybody reacts to things different, so it's not really my place to judge how they responded. But when Judy's telling Lorraine Tupy,
Yep.
to don't go look in there, don't do it, don't look in there. That seems like she's very bothered by that, as anybody would be. But if Colin and her just kind of standing there chit-chatting when the cops get there, it kind of makes me wonder if there's not more to the neighbors calling and saying what they said. Like if maybe there wasn't some sort of checklist, if you will, given to them to say what they said to the officers. Just going through the reports, the things that are put in there, like the things that the police say, that the neighbors said, just weird little things that don't seem like they would be important to this case. There's no real reason why it should be there. We talked about it a little bit in the last conference call where Dan had pointed out it seems like it was just like put in there to kind of push an agenda. That idea is seeming more and more realistic to me, at least.
And I think, too, to piggyback on what Dan was saying, Judy did talk to the police at some point, and she said comments that David was acting strange in the last few months. He had a mohawk. He was wearing military-type clothing. So the police might have been given at some point the impression that there was an intruder and it was him. And it's interesting that Judy is also saying these things because she also told police that she had limited contact with the Crawleys. So how would she know if David's behavior was strange or not? She doesn't even know the family that well.
I mean, this is a woman who said that her grandkids she used to allow the grandchildren to go over and play at David's house, and then she turns around and the next comment will say, I really didn't know David that well. It's like, which is it? Do you let your grandchildren play with strangers inside of that stranger's house?
Well, she had also said that she's not the one who decided the kids couldn't play over there anymore. It was her daughter, because her daughter is the one who got the weird vibe from him. It wasn't even her. So then you've got the fact that Colin is the one who supposedly saw the gun. Judy didn't actually see the gun. It's really hard going through and separating what she actually saw versus hearsay from her daughter or her husband or another neighbor or something like that.
Well, she's even gone on the record saying that she was shown the new furniture by David.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, she put that in a comment. I have that, actually. And why would, if she barely knew him, why would he invite her inside
to see the furniture?
All right, so third to show up on the scene is Officer John Broughton. While all three officers were standing on the west side of the house, they could smell the odor of decaying bodies. Now, Broughton he's the first person to check the back of the house. So you have three officers there. They've already looked. One has already looked through the front window. You have three neighbors that are hanging out, and so Broughton is told, go check the back of the house. Is that another common thing too? You have one officer in front, one officer in the back. Do you want two officers going through the back? To me, it just kind of seems like they're not that concerned about another person in that house, and they're not that concerned about this being a triple homicide. So when Broughton goes to the back, he says, I was instructed to check the rear of the residence for any signs of forced entry. That's what they're looking for here. The backyard is fenced in with a chain link fence, and the gates were closed but not locked. I thought that was another interesting thing too. I don't know. Over here, we don't really lock our side gates. I don't know what people in Minnesota do, or in Texas, or or wherever the rest of you are.
He had a small child and a dog, though. I would think that would be like the back door not being secured, even if it was broken. That not being secured, plus the gate not being locked, you wouldn't have need to force your way into the property. You've already got a clear path. The back gate's unlocked. The back door's broken. Why would you need to break your way in?
Here's what I think here. You get these, the calls come in from dispatch, 911 dispatch. And so the people responding are just typical patrol, traffic patrol officers. And they're showing up to a scene with bodies inside and a dog running around. So I think they're mainly waiting for instruction as far as what to do and, what's their role there. So they're chatting, and the house faces south, and the back of the house faces north. And so I think when they get to Broughton showing up there, the officers were at that time wandering over to the side, which is the west, and that's where they can first get the glimpse of the smell. The front door and the side doors and windows were closed. Only in the back was the door open just a little bit, that slider. So I think when they walked to the west and were about to go into that gate is when they caught the first whiff of it, and which would make sense. They're getting closer to where the door is open. And Minnesota, not common to lock. You have a chain link fence like that. There's just a clasp that closes it. There's not a lock. I don't know of any neighbors that have locks on it. And that fence, as I stood there before on the scene, was, I think it's a 4 or 3.5 foot high fence, very short. It's like just for dogs, pets, and little kids. Any adult can just basically jump over that fence or leap right over it. So it's very small, but so that would make sense. Now Broughton goes out of his way here to mention all these steps, and I think this is all just protocol. He's throwing in there, we're looking for forced entry. We're seeing if things are locked and things are not locked. Those are the kind of rhetoric that I think that's how cops speak when they enter a scene like that, or what they're instructed to say. So he's making sure that there was no forced entry, and there wasn't. And so that's, I think, that's what we're hearing a lot from his statement. The door was less than a 1/4 of an inch opened slightly, and they found it was not locked or secured with a bar lock. So he goes out of his way to, clearly explain how it was seen.
It makes sense. I'm just wondering if they had found signs that somebody had forced their way into that house, would that change what they did from that point on?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think they're trained in a certain way. Like when the crime scene photographers came in, all the time they spent right off the bat was taking 18 photos of the door, because that's their training, is to show was anything on the door, the jam, was it jammed, was it locked, was it pried open, how was the door open? So like Broughton here enters, the first thing he's on his mind is there any kind of forced entry? Now I think with the neighbors standing around, that I think lessened their alert for someone in the house, and the dog barking, and the first call came in saying that bodies had been here for a while, but I don't think there was any urgency that there was a threat on the scene. But they still have to go through the process of clearing the house, which is coming up on the next pages.
Well, they did a good job starting out with protocol, so what happened? Because protocol is not touching things and moving things. When you're just doing your initial picture taking, you're not supposed to be moving anything. You're documenting what is there before anything's moved. So they started out strong.
And Officer Broughton has been there a while. He's since retired. So he was a senior level. He was a veteran. He knew what was going on. You can tell by his comments and his statements and his reports that things were very well detailed. I mean, he said, I opened the door and there was, he said, quote, an overpowering odor of decaying flesh. Now that would make sense for bodies being there. That is obviously what the smell would be. And he goes on to say that there's a light on in the dining room. Christmas tree lights and other strings were still on. And he walked around the back of the house and then looked through the front window and saw 3 bodies in the living room floor. All were badly decomposed. One adult was lying on his back with a black semi-auto pistol nearby. Second adult body appeared to be laying on its stomach and or side. And between the two adult bodies was a body of a small child. So Broughton comes in and does his job, I think, describes everything, checks, goes around the house. He does everything, like Stephanie said, the protocol was there at the first folks that showed up.
Okay, last thing on Broughton here was this overpowering odor of decaying flesh. Does that help us give any indication of how long the bodies were there? Does this help show that the bodies were there for 3 weeks?
So I got family and friends that are in law enforcement. The first few days, up to a week, is when it's going to be the most horrendous. After that, the smell is still bad, but it backs off a little bit. The most overpowering is that first week, probably the first maybe days 3 through 7. And so when he says overpowering, that leads me to believe it's in that 7 to 10 day window that the bodies were sitting there. If it was 3 weeks, it would still stink, but I don't think you see the word overpowering, because by that time the stench is for the most part gone away. So that's the only other thing I can say on that. He does say the word overpowering, and that's the same adjective I get when talking with family and friends in law enforcement when they talk about that. Yes, it's going to smell later on as well, but if it's overpowering, it's in its first round of the whole rigor mortis. And so that's where I lean into that earlier stage, and I don't buy the 3 week stage because of Broughton's comment. And that's why I wanted to interview him. I talked to him on the phone after he resigned and retired. And I said, well, if I'd like to meet and go over the case with you, and I could meet, because I'm only 30 minutes away. And he said, well, let me run it past some people, and I'll let you know, but I'm open to, have a cup of coffee. And then he called back and says, I talked to, Gummert, and I didn't really have anything to do with the case, so I don't think we should meet. And so my answer is, these pages, Greg, here that you wrote, show that he was one of the very first people on the scene, saw the dog, saw the door ajar, smelled the decay. He would be a very good interview, I think. But someone did not want him speaking to me, even though he was no longer with the force, which had nothing to do with anything. He didn't have to ask permission at that point. Go ahead, Stephanie.
I was just going to say I completely agree with you there. That seems very odd that he would say that he didn't have much to do with it, because from just reading this, not even considering the whole police report, it sounds like he was one of the important interviews to get. So why would somebody have told him to decline it, the interview?
Well, that's the point. That's the same thing.
By him saying that he didn't have much to do with that, that's an outright lie, because clearly he was one of the first few people there. So.
And I think the way he phrased it on the phone call was he didn't have that much to do, and he wasn't playing a big important role in the detective in the investigation that went on months and up to a year later. And I said I wasn't looking for that. I was looking for a first response. I wanted to get your ideas from actually being the first, third person there on the scene. That very first initial shock and the sounds and the sights that you saw and you witnessed, I think would have been very helpful for a 10-minute interview. That's all. I wasn't talking about the detective in the investigation case, but he says I didn't have much to do with the case, so I shouldn't interview you. I shouldn't be speaking with you, or something to that effect.
It's just pretty odd.
But then again, his son is now in the force at Apple Valley.
Oh.
So there's still a connection that's not out altogether. His son is on that. He's one of the patrol officers, I believe, in Apple Valley.
Was his son a part of the force when this happened?
Not that I know of. I don't believe so. He may have been a junior officer or something to that effect, but he wasn't a sworn officer at the time, I don't believe.
He was a part of the case, the Josephson case, but I don't think he was a part of this case.
John Broughton's son was part of the other case.
The other one,
looked at.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yes,
Murder-suicide. Interesting. That happened, how long after?
November 3rd, 2016.
So we'll move on to Officer Adam Keeler, and he showed up fourth. and he helped secure the scene until the dog was removed from the house. What do we know about Community Service Officer, CSO, Brian Booth? Because he's the one who was called to help take the dog out of the house. So I guess Community Service Officer Brian Booth had some experience with dogs at this point. There was a reason why he was called to help take this dog out of this house.
I just always assumed that he was like a dog catcher or worked for the pound.
That's kind of what I thought, too.
Maybe I'm reading way too much into it.
Like, I never really thought much about it. Like, he came and got the dog, so I thought, oh, okay, so he knows about dogs. And then
But
just
the thing
further
is-
along, you just kind of forget that he was the one who came.
And he just throws Paleo in the back of the truck and leaves him there for hours.
That's a good topic, Sophia, because the phrasing here had some questions early on in the case in the Justice page, because it says that he got there, got the dog out, and put him into the bed of my truck where he stayed until roughly 1900 hours. Now, 1900 hours at 7 p.m., and that day I think it was 17 degrees outside on a January day in Minnesota in winter. So we assumed it was a pickup truck with an open bed. Later they said no, the only squad cars that were there were SUVs and like a Ford Explorer type of a thing, and that's where the dog was. And I said, here in Minnesota, you don't call that the bed unless it's a pickup truck. So why would he explain it as the CSO officer saying I took Paleo and put him in the bed of my truck? And really he just meant essentially the back seat or the way back area of an SUV. Just had him there. So the car was on, the car was running, so the car was warm, and so I put to bed any stress there was from members of the page thinking, why was Paleo, standing outside in the shivering cold in a pickup truck? So they said they had the car running. So which prompted the next question. We said he had the car running till 7 p.m. after getting there at 1. So 6 straight hours. And I think this was Judy Prochnow who was giving all the background on this, like saying, no, there was no pickup for the truck. And I said, but well, why was the truck running for 6 straight hours? It ran out of gas, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
She said, well, maybe...
Well, I mean, maybe somebody went and made a run and brought a gas can or something.
But you're right. The paperwork shows that till 1900 hours, that dog was there. They didn't take the dog to the pound or anything. Basically, he was just quarantined with no food. That they may have given him some... I don't even think they can get him any treats at that point. I think they had a bowl of water or something. They still didn't know what was in his system, so I don't think they were allowed to give him any food. Yeah, they had treats to get him out. So they had some treats, but I don't think they were allowed to give him any food. Then they took him to the Palomino Pet Hospital and advised the kennel to only feed and water the dog, but not to do anything else because it's part of an investigation. So that was Brian Booth and Officer Adam Keeler. But that was very strange. Some of the words that were used, the length of time that was mentioned.
See, when I think of them wording bed of truck, I think of like an F-150 with one of those hard shells on the back of it. And
oh, yes. I was thinking that too. Yep. Whether or not it was open, it could have had a topper on it or something. But we're thinking of kind of a pickup truck here in Minnesota is what we think of. F-150 with or without a topper, but still with the topper on, 17 degrees is not insulated. And with no topper on, 17 degrees is exposed. So either way, that doesn't make sense. And then I think that was at the time that Judy said that they were like all Ford Explorer type of SUV patrol cars that the dog was in. And I said, I still wouldn't say that I put the dog in the bed of my truck if it's an SUV. So I said, the terminology seems odd. But regardless, if they were there at 1 o'clock, 1700 out, 7 o'clock, that's 6 hours that the dog was sitting there doing nothing. And for all they know, he hadn't eaten for 3 weeks.
I guess they had already seen what the living room was through the front window, through the back window. Why clear the garage first?
Was it right there next to, because you come in through the back, and there's that fireplace, the kitchen. The garage is right there in that same area?
Right.
Yeah, the door leads right into the garage from that area. So if protocol would be to sweep the house going from right to left or whenever you come in, that would have made sense. And they both went together, so they cleared the garage first. I don't know if that's strange, Greg, or not. I didn't read too much into that. They saw the writing on the wall in blood, and then Dahlstrom, who's also in there at this time, noticed blood writing on the wall and several bloody footprints on the floor. And then he goes on to say that the living room floor laid 3 heavily decomposed bodies, 2 adults and 1 child. I think the word heavily is left up for debate. The Apple Valley homicide, they get one average of 1 homicide a year in Apple Valley, Minnesota. Very rarely would any of these officers even see a decaying body at all. So I think what they saw was they were decaying, but David and Kamel were bloated. The bodies were bloated at this time. So they were in, I think, that first round of decay or rigor, but not maybe heavily decomposed. That's the only thing I have to say about that. It wasn't like they were there for, months or something, but he did say heavily. Now, Broden goes on to say that the body's presumed to be that of the homeowners and the daughter. All 3 levels of the house was then cleared, and officers left the house and waited for detectives to arrive. So the 3 went in, cleared, and then there was no threat. They began then to wait until the detectives arrived, which is also protocol, I'm assuming.
Do we have the recording of them clearing the house?
Yeah, the audio looks like it was definitely cut. So it was definitely cut for certain. I'm not sure why that audio was cut, but you can clearly see, maybe just because there's nothing happening during that time. That audio recording is very important because you can hear how they sound. You can hear their dog. That's probably one of the best ones, one of the best reasons. Is to hear what does their dog sound like during that call.
I need to listen to that again.
I was posting in the group very early on. Somebody had that audio, and I just want to thank them. Whoever you are, thank you for posting that into the group because I thought that was a big help.
The way this says they saw several bloody footprints on the floor in the area between the kitchen and the living room. The picture I get in my head is you can clearly see a lot of bloody footprints in that area. So when you look at the pictures, you wonder where they're talking about because the pictures that's not what I would say is several bloody footprints. I mean, it's a few, but it's just severely lacking for what you picture in your head versus what the picture shows.
Well, I mean, there's several people that have gone on the record saying that David walked around the crime scene for several days and was staging it, and it's crazy. There's possibly 2 and 1 handprint.
Yeah, there was another rumor, too, remember, about how that they had proved that those were David's footprints. And we know that that's not true at all.
Correct.
And I don't think that the people who told us that, I don't think that they really looked at it. I think somebody told them that. Mm-hmm. I don't think that a lot of these people, a lot of the family and friends, from what I've gathered, they have not looked at a lot of these documents. I do not believe that they have looked at these documents. And if I'm wrong, then I have no problem being wrong. Only they know what they have looked at and what they haven't. But based on the conversations that I've had with family, friends, I do not believe that they have read a lot of these documents.
Well, how could they make a documentary, or a supposed documentary, of this case?
Yeah.
But not read the documents?
Yeah, they didn't want to read them. They didn't want to look at them.
Well, I mean, that's just like the private detective.
Yeah,
he had it all. He looked at it. It's like he just skimmed over it.
They weren't looking for anything that might stand out. It's all just speculative, and it's all based on feelings of them wanting David to be guilty, not on giving him the benefit of the doubt that we are innocent. We are supposed to be until proven guilty.
I would just say that the raw audio that you guys mentioned is on YouTube, and if anybody's interested, you can look it up and listen to for yourself. Also, if anybody's just catching on to the case, like Greg had mentioned, make sure you read the documents Greg has posted. Look through the crime scene photos and see for yourself so you can be better informed about this case.
And just to let everybody listening to this podcast, all the files pertaining to this case are located within the Justice for Crowley, or David Crowley and Family group, and it's all located at the top of the group. They've been added by different members, Greg, Dan, myself, everything from that we've received from Apple Valley and the BCA is all up there.
We still got one more paragraph here to cover. So the Crowley mailbox was full. After Officer Becker photographed the mailbox, she opened it and removed 2 pieces of mail, one belonging to David and the other to Kamel. The postmaster was arriving at this time, so this kind of gave us an idea of when the mail was being dropped off every day. Based on this, kind of assuming around 2 p.m., maybe 3 p.m. Another interesting thing is that the postman handed her David Crowley's mail. Where the mailboxes are, because this isn't like David Crowley's mailbox is at his house. It's actually towards the sidewalk with 2 other mailboxes too. And what's in those mailboxes is also another thing here, but I think that's covered later on, so I won't get too much into that. But as a mailman, as a postal service, or a postmaster, as it's written here, aren't they supposed to put the mail into the mailbox, not hand it to somebody?
My mail people won't even hand it to my kids. Like, if I ask them for it, they'll walk up to my door and still put it in my little slot. When we lived in another town where we had a mailbox, like kind of connected with the other neighbors, they still wouldn't hand it to any of my kids. They would go and put it in the box. So I'm wondering why this postmaster handed it to Officer Becker.
Maybe that's why, because she's
an officer?
She's an officer.
I've walked up to our mailman plenty of times and asked him before he's started putting mail in the mailboxes and asked for mail for 2201, and he hands it right on over. But he drops packages off at our home all the time, so...
Well, I would think if Tara Becker, if she asked for it, I think he would give it to her, but maybe he just felt like, okay, well, she needs to have this, because she was going through David Crowley's mail right at that time, at the same time. So,
well, she talks about 2 pieces of mail, but the mailbox is about 2/3 filled. I'm looking at the photo right now.
Right, and we don't know if that photo was taken after, because after she does all this, she puts everything back in there. I do believe it's put back into the mailbox, if I remember correctly, and then it's filmed, or then it's photographed. This is from BCA 488, page 100. This is a note found in the BCA notes that states, there's mail in mailbox, and the dates are from December 29th, front packages, 1/10/15. The 1/10/15 date is something that still baffles me. I don't know what that means. So if anybody wants to look that up, you can look that up in the BCA 488 PDF on page 100. Okay. Joe Cooksley writes this. So, quote, mail in mailbox December 29th / front packages 1/10/15. So the 1/10/15 is what really interests me here, because that is the first day that the packages are seen. So maybe that's what they mean by the front packages 1/10/15. It's just not really clear.
Well, the great thing about this book is it's like Dan said in the foreword. That was amazingly well the way he put that. It's not to tell you who committed this crime. It's not to tell you why you should believe the way we do. It's to give you enough information for you to go and find your own decision. It's a tool. It's like a reference guidebook, if you will, of the basic facts that you need to know of what happened so that then you can go and track it down and decide what you think happened.
Any final words here from anyone?
I wanted to say thank you again to Dan, even with all the drama that came from it. Thank you for putting up the money and hiring the private investigator. I think that was a really important step. He may not have done a great job, but the fact that you stepped up and did that, I really respect you as a person just for that fact. You know, not even considering all the work you guys have all put into this. Just that alone, you guys are all some pretty amazing people, and it really should be noted that, you know, without any horse in the race, we're all, aside from our busy lives, trying to find justice for this family.
Since 2015, I'll tell you, I've lost a lot of respect for a lot of people that I thought were real truth seekers. I really thought that these people were looking for truth, and now I don't. You know, now I think it is all about money, and it's all about fame, and it's all about them. It's not about truth, because this case is so toxic. There is no winner in this case. You know, nobody wins here. All that we can do is try to find justice and try to bring justice to this case, and that requires a certain amount of a sacrifice. And for people that are public, for people that are known, for people that have following, for people that want to get likes, people that have share their data and everything, want them to treat them special, wipe their feet and kiss their ass. Those people are, you know, look at this case and don't want to touch it. So how real could those people be? You know, and it's just like every day we hear, not every day, but very often I hear, well, we should get this person to look into this case. And then we get a person to look into this case, and they don't want to look into it. They don't want to touch it. You know, but yet I'm supposed to follow them. I'm supposed to think that they're this great person who is good at cracking these cases and looking at these unsolved cases and everything. They're so great at that. We give them a slam dunk case and they won't touch it. Something wrong with that.
Very much so.
If it makes you feel any better, his TV show fell through.
Yeah, that does make me feel better.
I just think, given all the things that he's got in the works, like as far as his own personal career, I really think he did not want to disagree with the police officers on this case, because if he had openly come out and said, well, yeah, you definitely got something here, Dan, then all those police officers, all the rapport that he's built up over all these years with all these people would be gone. Just from him saying, I believe these police officers didn't do the best they could have. You know, that could be a reason why he wouldn't have said that we're on the right track or anything to that effect. That could be a very good reason why he basically just told us that we're all nuts for looking into it.
And I agree with that. I mean, he doesn't want to burn those bridges with any police that he might have to work with or any deals that he has in the works.
Right, but at the same time, you're kind of pissed at him, or I am at least, because he was paid to do a job and he didn't do it.
Heck, I could have done that.
My daughter could have done a better job than he did. for a whole lot less money. Like, I
could have gave
feel
you a
so
great
bad.
deal, Dan.
Like, he could have, Kenneth Maines could have been, yeah, he would have had some negative blowback, but anybody who puts their name to a case where other people say something different is going to have negative blowback. David himself said that you're going to have that. He was experiencing the negative blowback on the Gray State movie. You know, there was all those people telling him that, you know, oh, you're not actually going to do this, are you, right? That's going to happen no matter what, because there's always going to be somebody who doesn't agree with what everybody else says. But in order to get this properly looked into, there has to be somebody who's willing to say, fuck it, I don't care if I lose my job. I don't care if all these officers are mad at me. If they're really going to be mad at me for telling the truth, well, then I don't need all of them. Because, like Greg just said, it's a slam dunk case, but it's almost like people are afraid to put their name to it because of all the other crap that's attached to it. But these were people. These were human beings. If we're going to say that, why even have police look into murder cases? Why even have a justice system? If we don't believe that every single person on this planet matters, why do we even have laws? It's stupid. Every single person matters, no matter if you knew them or not. They were a human being. The laws are there to protect us. And if the police are not going to look into a case and investigate it to their best ability, there's something seriously wrong.
You know, Dan is a very smart guy. There's a reason why he picked Kenneth Maines. And if the guy that he picked can do such a horrible job, it was a big downer. It wasn't a setback, though. It wasn't like we had to regroup or anything like that. You know, the truth is on our side. I mean, I can show this case to family, friends. I can show this case to people who are teenagers, people who are in grade school, people who are in their 60s, in their 70s, and they get it. You're telling me a guy like Kenneth Maines, a guy like that who, you know, has lived this, has worked these cases, who is doing a show and all that on cold cases and solving cold cases. This is the biggest cold case you'll ever solve. Everything was given to him on a silver platter. All he had to do was just say, there's something wrong here. That's it. He couldn't even do that.
Well, but if you think back to what that detective said to Dan, where he said he'd be willing to talk, and then he talked to Gummert, and then he said, well, I really don't have anything, you know, much input on it, or, you know, whatever. That, to me, says there's something wrong. Just that. Because if he was on that scene first, that is important to know what he said. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made a report. If what he had to say about what he saw when he first got there was not important, they would not have had him, they wouldn't have let him stay. They would have said, all right, buddy, go take off. They wouldn't have even had him really write a report. If it really wasn't important, why would it even be in there? But then there's other stuff that you find that is so vitally important to this that they just overlook. Like the hand, the gun, the hands, the arm, the cracked rib, all the things that do not make sense, they overlooked. But then things that they should have looked into were not. That,
like the fact that there wasn't a call placed on December 16th for the pot or a text message sent from David's phone.
Right, the follow-up
there
afterwards.
Were financial issues, the unknown DNA, that kind of stuff, or the telephone still being, or his account, his AT&T account still being active as of last year. Who's paying for it? Is there identity theft? I haven't checked since to see if it's still active, but it's a little concerning that they were still active at that time.
Well, if they had gone into like witness protection or something like that,
they wouldn't have kept their phones.
Right, they wouldn't have kept their phones. They would have had to cut off all contact, completely change who they are and what they were about, everything down to their childhood, their whole life story, their name, where they're from, everything. They have to completely become a new person.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole point of witness protection, is so that you can be given a new identity. So if they were in something like that, those phones wouldn't have been paid.
Correct.
You wouldn't find any of the future breadcrumbs after they've died. If they did it on their own, in this day and age, that is insanely hard to actually pull off, because there are cameras everywhere. Every single, well, not every single person, but pretty much every single person on this planet has a phone with a camera and a recording device of some sort, whether it's an app or just the phone itself. They would be found.
All right, I want to thank you all for listening here. This is episode 3. I hope you enjoyed this discussion with Dan Hinnon, myself, Greg Fernandez Jr., Sophia, Stephanie, and our good friend Ann. So these 3 pages are from the first responders and what they saw when they first entered that house. This is what happens. This is the gray stage. Right now we're going to play the audio from when the first responders enter the house and clear this house. The 2 officers to enter the house and clear the house are Sergeant Greg Dahlstrom and Sergeant Adam Keeler. From this audio, I'm not sure which officer's voice you will hear. This is the raw audio from one of our members, Ken Pasquale.
45S41, I'm in the area of the suspicious vehicle, territorial drive.
10-4.
10-4, go ahead.
2933 Sam 14 for suspicion, 1055 Ramsdale Drive. Cop reporting suspicious behavior next door. Went over to the home to the right of the RP, sees dead bodies inside the house, dog inside, sees a gun in the house on the floor.
933, copy. Sam 14, copy.
2933 additional.
Go ahead.
According to the RP, residents have been out of town since before Christmas. Now there are Christmas presents out front, a dog inside, and what looks like possibly bodies inside, a gun laying on the floor inside.
Copy.
Want me to start medics?
You can start them. I'll be en route in about 1 minute.
Received. Wait, Anthony, you can put me on that call. Just 10 minutes and I'll have comments later.
Sam 14 is 7 medic stage.
Yep. Of the residents where the bodies are is 1051. 1051. 1303.
Sam 14, I'm out.
10-4. 1305.
49 Sam 14.
49 Sam 14.
Stand by, man.
10. 49 20, I'm out.
934, send me the ramp, so I'm out. 49 Sam 14.
49 Sam 14.
There's several obviously deceased bodies in the front. Why don't you give us 1033? Wait for 34 to get here and we'll make entry.
1033 traffic for 4900 squad. All others go to TAC 10. 1033, 4900, 1307.
1034, still on it.
Separation.
49 Sam 14.
49 Sam 14.
Do you have our CSO come with his catch pole as well? It's a very angry dog inside.
10-4, 49 Charlie, 1 copy, I'll clear you.
4933, rear slider is unlocked, slightly ajar.
Copy, rear slider, unlocked, slightly ajar.
Charlie, 1 copy. 33 up 2.
33
Okay, just let Apple Valley know if they get busy with pending calls, we can help out.
10-4.
Copy. 4934, 76.
10-4.
3517, I copied, I'll take care of it.
10-4, thank you. 49 Sam 14.
We're going to make entry as soon as CSO can get here near this dog.
10-4. 3311 for 3 vehicle, 1050, display and pilot. 11, I copy. And they're pulling into the gas station. 10-4. 1350.
34 is C1 on the main. Go for C1, go for C. What's your 20? Right around the corner. Alright, when you get here, bring your pole over and back. Copy. 4934.
4934.
You make an entry into the house.
Copy, making entry. 10-4.
49 Sam 14.
49 Sam 14.
First floor search complete. 3 obviously dead. We're in the basement.
10-4. First floor search, now in the basement.
4934.
4934.
For code 4, let's just keep the channel for a little bit.
10-4, code 4, keeping the channel. 4934.
Go ahead.
Can Alina clear, or do you want them in?
Sorry, Alina can clear.
10-4, Alina clearing.
49 Sam 14.
49 Sam 14.
Page out all investigators and go to our PD. I'll be in contact with 901 here shortly.
10-4, page out all investigators.
34. We don't need to block off the street. Just put your squad there. 45 I'll be in the area. I go here in PDM.
10-4, 1338.
Well, I'm also in the area.
10-4.
49 Sam 14.
49 Sam 14.
We get BCA call. Have them call the number on my login screen, please.
And what you have are people that are accusing David Crowley of this crime without the evidence. Looking through all the evidence here, as we are going to do by going through this book, is to show that there is no evidence that proves David Crowley guilty. None of this does. It's all based on feelings. It's all based on what the investigators quote-unquote believe. And it doesn't mean that all of the investigators have come to the same conclusion that their superiors have. But it's very clear at some point the investigators and everybody else had to fall in line with what the official theory would be. And let's not forget how quickly that the Apple Valley Police decided David Crowley was guilty and the public was not in any danger. We're talking within 24 hours, possibly within hours. We can clearly see by the 94 pages of police reports, by the over 500 pages of BCA documents, and by the medical examiner's report, there's nothing in here that proves David Crowley guilty. They can suspect him. He might be their suspect. But being a suspect and being the perpetrator of the crime are two completely different things. Give this to people. Hand this book out. Share the information in this book. You can download all of the information for yourself right now by going to thegraystage.wordpress.com. Scroll down to the bottom of the homepage and you can download all of these documents right now. A lot of these documents can also be found in the Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook group and Dan Hinnan's website, theuglytruth.info. Once again, I want to thank you all. If you have not listened to the first 2 episodes, I think it is well worth the effort, well worth the time. We try to keep these to a maximum of 1 hour, about 60 minutes, and these will be released on the 1st of every month. This is not about me, this is not about you, this is about getting justice for this family. That is the purpose here. And it's very clear. We have a slam dunk case. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. It really doesn't. But it does require you to remove your personal feelings and to remove what you think happened here. Look at the documents. Look at the images. You can clearly see David Crowley is innocent until proven guilty, which can never be done for multiple reasons. Obviously, one reason being that David Crowley is dead. But let's say that he wasn't dead. Even then, based on all of this information that we have here, these authorities cannot even prove that David Crowley wrote anything in that house. They can barely prove David Crowley ever put his hand on that gun. And we know for sure that they cannot put the pen in David Crowley's hand. They cannot tie the footprints in the living room to David Crowley. They cannot tie any of the prints on the laptop in the kitchen to David Crowley, and they cannot tie the blood writing on the living room wall to David Crowley. More so, they can't even find the bullet that killed David Crowley. His blood is not on any of these bullets. That's about it, my friends. I want to thank you all. Alright, I want to thank you all again for listening to the Gray Stage podcast. This has been episode number 3. We truly appreciate all of your help. Please consider joining the group Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook group created by Dan Hennon. Think about joining some of our live calls on our YouTube channel, The Gray Stage. And of course, we want to thank you again for listening to this podcast, for listening to every episode of this podcast, and for helping to spread the word to let people know justice is coming. Justice is coming. It will be coming. Don't worry about that. Until next time, episode 4 will be next month. And of course, episode 4 will be the suspicious deaths. That will cover pages 19 all the way through, it looks like pages... That will cover pages 19 to 24. And in this, we are going to finally get the detectives who show up, the BCA who shows up, and of course, the medical examiners. And what they report when they walk into the house. When they go through the house thoroughly and find everything. Oh, but 2 important things they don't find. Item 53 and item 57. Item 53 is a bullet hole that rolls out of the living room carpet a few days after the investigators leave the house. And of course, item 57 is a bullet that is found 1 month later. And that bullet is only found because investigators are told that there is a bullet hole in the living room ceiling. So again, investigators, BCA, medical examiner, cleaning crew, everybody except for some of the friends of David Crowley